Listen!
Just a heads up, guys, this episode does have a trigger warning. It will be talking about self-harm and other topics of mental health, such as unaliving yourself. If you believe that that content will upset you or make you feel unsafe in any way, please do not watch the content, and my heart goes out to you. There's some notations and phone numbers for help and assistance in the description of this video if you are feeling like you need to talk to anyone or just needing some help at this time, a little extra support. I love you, and you are very important, and you matter. I hope you enjoy the episode. For common coping mechanisms number 1 through 5, click the card in the upper right corner of this screen now. Otherwise, here's the final mechanism number 6. All right, here we are at tendency number 6, the final tendency, the fearful avoidant, when in stressful or overwhelming situations in relationships, is a tendency to suffer from mental and physical health struggles. Okay, so as a child, the fearful avoidant, like we've talked about many times, was required to stay on high alert so they could stay safe in their environment, and it was an ever-changing and very scary environment, typically very chaotic. So they were always unsafe, and whether that meant mentally safe or physically safe, they were always unsafe in some way. And so they had to stay on high alert all the time. So this happened during their brain development and at a crucial time where your brain is still learning how to do all of its functions. Okay, so their brain learned this high alert state as a constant. It learned that you need to be that way all the time. It wasn't just employed in rare situations of needing to be in high alert. It was just constant. So most people, their brain learns when to activate that, and it's just for that short period of time, and then that they push on through, So the body wasn't designed to have that high alert state in the nervous system constantly. So as a result, there's going to be effects of that. The effects of that are going to be detrimental to your body and your emotional health. So when these chemicals are active in the body for such a long period of time, they produce stress. And stress, if occurring for a long extended period of time throughout your life, is very dangerous, very harmful, and can even, in some studies they've learned, cause death. It causes many physical health issues and causes people to be more vulnerable to disease and illness, and also obviously causes mental health struggles. To better understand that this is absolutely a bodily chemical response and is biologically tracked, I want to show you an article from Harvard Health Publishing, Harvard Medical School. So, you can assess the credibility of that one. This article is called Understanding the Stress Response, and it's from July 6, 2020. Chronic activation of this survival mechanism impairs health. This is an article precisely about what I just talked about. So it's talking about those chemicals that are released when the nervous system is in high alert. I'm just going to notate a quick part about this. So the sympathetic nervous system functions like a gas pedal in a car. It triggers the fight or flight response, providing the body with a burst of energy so it can respond to perceived dangers. The parasympathetic nervous system acts like a brake. It promotes the rest and digest response that calms the body down after the danger has passed. Okay. After the amygdala sends a distress signal, the hypothalamus activates the sympathetic nervous system by sending signals through the autonomic nerves to the adrenal glands. These glands respond by pumping the hormone epinephrine, also known as adrenaline, into the bloodstream. As adrenaline circulates through the body, it brings a number of physiological changes. The heart beats faster than normal, pushing blood to the muscles, heart, and other vital organs. Pulse rate and blood pressure go up. The person undergoing these changes also starts to breathe more rapidly. Small airways in the lungs open. This way, the lungs can take in as much oxygen as possible with each breath. Extra oxygen is sent to the brain, increasing alertness. Sight, hearing, and other senses become sharper. Meanwhile, the adrenaline triggers the release of blood sugar, glucose, and fats from temporary storage sites in the body. These nutrients flood into the bloodstream, supplying energy to all parts of the body. Okay, so that's what's happening when you're getting a surge of adrenaline. Okay, this is meant to be a quick survival reaction. It is not meant to continuously happen in your body over long periods of time. All of these changes happen so quickly that people aren't even aware of them. In fact, the wiring is so efficient, it says, that the amygdala and the hypothalamus start this cascade even before the brain's visual center have had a chance to fully process what is happening. That means it's firing automatically by what it's learned, okay? because it doesn't even quite know what's happening yet when it does this. That's why people are able to jump out of the path of an oncoming car even before they think about what they're doing. That's why people can have those quick responses, "Ah!" or like save somebody from a car that's coming, you know, because of this system. So it says the HPA axis relies on a series of hormonal signals to keep the sympathetic nervous system, the gas pedal, pressed down. That's when you have problems, okay? If the brain continues to perceive something as dangerous, the hypothalamus releases CRH hormone. I don't know how to say it. Corticotropin releasing hormone, which travels to the pituitary gland, triggering the release of adrenocorticotropic, ACTH, okay? The hormone. Persistent adrenaline surges can damage blood vessels and arteries, increasing blood pressure and raising risk of heart attacks or strokes. Elevated cortisol levels create physiological changes that help to replenish the body's energy stores that are depleted during the stress response, but they inadvertently contribute to the buildup of fat tissue and to weight gain. So those are just some side effects of it as well. That article is very interesting. Check that out. It gives some more insight to what is physically going on for the fearful avoidant, why they do tend to more frequently have health struggles, more frequently suffer from mental health issues. It really puts a science to it. So this is just something that is very common amongst fearful avoidants since they are programmed to be constantly in that state of high alert. Sometimes these imbalances can be permanently irreversible. So they become something that you can only treat. So that's heartbreaking. And that's not to say that anyone is a lost cause. You know, there's so many treatments out there, and you definitely can have a very happy, stable life again. If these issues, physical diseases or mental illnesses are in their gene pool, run in their family history, their family medical history, they are much more likely to develop those themselves. So you take someone who by way of genetics and by way of nature, if you will, is already predispositioned to be vulnerable to certain diseases or mental illnesses, right? And then you bring in nurture, which for the fearful avoidant consisted of chaos and high alert state in the brain, learning to be a constant, and the release of certain chemicals that, when released into the body for too long, become a toxin and cause high levels of stress, which is detrimental to our bodies and cause diseases and mental illnesses. Put them together, what do we got? A person who is highly likely to develop these diseases and these mental illnesses. They can't avoid it. They did not have a chance. So it's something to be empathetic and compassionate about to some extent. Now is the time for that trigger warning that we discussed in the beginning of the video. The next few moments of this episode will contain information regarding self-harm and references to unaliving yourself. So if you believe that this content will be too upsetting, too triggering for you in any way, please keep yourself safe and do not watch the content. Of all the attachment styles, fearful avoidants are most likely, more than others, to struggle with depression, with anxiety disorders, and forms of self-hatred and forms of self-harm. So it's just more prevalent amongst this attachment style. I mean, it makes a lot of sense, right? When someone has gone through so many repetitive situations, regardless of the circumstances, of being harmed by people, being hurt by others, being betrayed, being rejected, feeling abandoned, in toxic relationships, and just being let down and disappointed over and over and over again. You start to feel like you can't trust anyone, and that is, as we know, the fearful avoidance worldview. No one's okay. I'm not okay. You're not okay. No one's okay. So they don't trust anyone. They don't feel like they can never depend on anyone. And eventually that becomes a pretty bleak outlook. And over time, having that carried on your shoulders and having to endure through those feelings constantly and pick yourself back up and try to trust again, try to be the you that you know you can be, aside from what's happened to you, it gets hard. It gets a heavy load to carry. It gets really devastating when you come across, again, another disappointment of something you thought promising. It's hard, period. So, I mean, it makes sense. They can't help in these situations at some point to inevitably start to think that there must be just something innately wrong with them, that they must lack some type of intrinsic value in the world, that they just must be unworthy. That is a natural feeling and thought to have if that's how your life has been. So sometimes the pain from those types of feelings and thoughts can grow to such an intolerable level that they can't take it. There's only a certain level of emotional turmoil and emotional pain and physical pain even. That's why the body has a shock system. You go into shock because your body literally cannot tolerate it. Your emotions have that same thing. So they need relief. They get to a point where it's so much pain and they can't seem to get relief. It's too much. So like we talked about before, they may dissociate in situations like that. But another tendency that is quite common is to self-harm. And this is the one that I said in the beginning is a little shied away from. A lot of people don't like to discuss these types of topics. It's very taboo, it's very dark, and it's not something most people are very proud of. They may try to release this pain in their emotions by way of bodily injury to themselves, harming themselves in multiple different ways. Here is a myth versus fact sheet that I found regarding self-injury. This kind of touches on why it can be a little bit shameful, a lot shameful actually, and why most people still to this day feel that there is too much negativity surrounding this topic that they don't feel comfortable to talk about it or even seek help about it because they're so ashamed. So myth number one, only females and teenagers self-injure. That's commonly thought that way. So if you're a male or you're older, an older woman or an adult woman, then, everyone's going to be like, isn't that for emo kids? Isn't that for really emotional teenagers that don't know how to handle their emotions? Like, why don't you grow up? Or like to a man, they might say, oh, wow, you're being such a girl or something like that. And that would give great reason to feel embarrassed. When the facts actually are that studies show that 30 to 40% of people who self-injure are actually male, and that people of all ages injure. From age 7, that's heartbreaking, I hate that, to older adults. Studies do show that self-injury typically occurs in teen years. So it is just more common amongst teens. But there's still a huge, huge number of people who are male and who are older who struggle with self-harm. So the second one, self-injury is a suicide attempt. This is also not true. Self-injury is usually a way to cope with negative feelings. Most studies show people use self-injury as a way to avoid suicide. So misunderstanding. A lot of people do not like to be misunderstood. It's not a good feeling when people misjudge you, misrepresent you, misunderstand you. And when you're doing a behavior that people automatically assume means that you just don't value your life and you're idle and you want to die, you're not going to get the proper treatment that you need for the actual problem. It's going to be the wrong problem. So most often, if someone is self-harming, they actually do not want to die. And they are trying to get rid of these feelings because they can't stand them and they want to feel better. And it's typically more than likely a cry for help. This next one is my least favorite one. People who self-injure are manipulative and or attention-seeking. This one drives me nuts, and it's probably because that is what people think immediately. And that is the opposite of what they're feeling. They're extremely embarrassed about it. They do not want attention for it. If anything, when there is attention being sought, because sometimes it is attention based in the nature of it being a cry for help. It's like a desperate attempt for like, hey, this is something that I know needs attention because this is not right and I don't know what to do about it. And I really need you to see that it's serious. And oftentimes they are so desperate to get rid of that pain and get out of that state of mind and stop that horrible existence that it is to be in that pain, that it is for attention. They want to bring attention to their suffering because it's real and it's that dire and it's starting to feel for them that they aren't going to make it through it. So they are crying out for attention and help. So that gets spent a lot. Now, the secondary compound pain that can come from the results of this stigma right here is that someone who is already very embarrassed, very ashamed, desperately seeking relief, desperately seeking someone to help them, someone to care for them, and someone to essentially maybe save them a bit, because let's face it, when someone is this low, they are a bit in need of saving. And they're just desperate for help. And then they get misconstrued. They get called a manipulator or someone who's attention seeking. They then get more rejected and pushed away and looked down upon and judged. And that makes them feel even more deplorable than they already did. So this is just a terrible cycle. And there's not a lot of worse things that you could do in that situation than the worst thing. That is the worst thing you can do in this situation to compound the problem. So in those situations, that is when it can lead to unaliving yourself. That is when it can turn to that, because it's going to go one of two ways at that point. They're going to feel completely abandoned and rejected by the world and very alone. And they're either going to find their path out of that by helping themselves and looking inward and having that inner strength to come out of that, which is very, very hard to do when you are in that low of a space, or they're going to go the other direction. And that is when self-harm can turn into unaliving yourself. Now, I'm not going to incorrectly claim that no one ever does this to be manipulative or to to gain attention for something or get their way or threaten someone, because that absolutely does happen, but it's very uncommon. It's the rare case. It's not as common as it's been sensationalized in Hollywood and in movies and different, stories that get passed around, but it is not the common case for people who self-harm. So for someone who is self-harming, if you know them and you love them, it's just about probably the absolute worst thing you could do. It would be to reject them and abandon them and pull away from them because they are self-harming, and just kind of look down upon them and tell them that they're crazy and they need help, and then just abandon them. And that's what happens all too frequently. Now, it is good to redirect your focus when you're having one of those episodes. That is the right intention there. However, and I do also understand that those who typically engage in self-harm find during these times that nothing else seems to work. And it's frightening. It's terrifying. It's a desperate, dark moment of their life where they are panicked and terrified, in pain. It's very real. And they can't seem to find anything that can relieve that. So I don't want to in any way, shape, or form, period, at all, come across as saying that self-harm is a proper way or a good way to redirect your focus during these times. I am simply communicating that from the perspective of a self-harmer, that at those times, they cannot find another method. They simply, that is the facts. They cannot find anything else that works for them, and they are desperate. So they may physically harm themselves to shift their focus to something that they can bear. And it has an effect at the time of that very thing. It redirects them to the pain on the surface level of whatever they've just done to their body, and tends to bring that emotional pain down a bit to a more tolerable level. It's a hard behavior for people who haven't felt that way to grasp. So I just offer that information as a way to help enlighten that perspective, to have a little bit more empathy towards that behavior and where it comes from, if you are familiar with someone who has done this. Here comes another story time real quick. And I feel very passionate about this. So this will be my very first time speaking about this ever publicly. Okay, so one of my deepest and darkest secrets of my entire life has been that I have struggled with self-harm. I never thought that I would ever tell a single soul about this. I thought for sure this would be a secret I would take to my grave. I was horribly ashamed of it. Never thought that I would ever be able to tell anyone this. It was so terrible. Over the years, gaining more knowledge about it, gaining a deeper understanding about self-harm through lots of research, lots of studying of it, lots of reviewing different cases of people who have had this behavior and finding out what's behind it, and exploring myself and going through my own self-development and growing and all of that comes with age and experience. I have gained such a deeper and better understanding of the reason that this happened to me, and I'm no longer ashamed of it at all. Maybe I won't say at all, if I'm being very honest. It's a very new development for me to feel this way, and so I'm still warming up to it, but for the most part, I have completely absolved my shame about it. And I have no problem talking about it and speaking out about it and bringing more awareness to the topic. It's an avoided topic for the most part. Like on a mainstream level, like most people are not super comfortable discussing that as a real thing that affects people in their life, that is a real possibility for people around them or them. So I had my first experience with it and a really terrible bout of this issue back in 2012. And that's when I was diagnosed with major depressive disorder as well as an anxiety disorder. And this was less than a year after I had my second child. I was 24 years old. I was living independently on my own in my own place with my children and my boyfriend at the time, the father of my second child. And I was working full-time, sometimes more than full-time. I was attending school online in a self-taught, fast-paced program for a degree, full-time. And I was raising my two children. One was about 9 years old, maybe almost 10 by that time, and the other was under a year old. And I was a wreck. I was doing an impossible juggling act. I was not able to make enough money, even at the great job that I had and all the work I put in, to be able to afford 2 children in the area that I live in, which is one of the highest cost of living areas in the United States. I was being mistreated. I was being neglected, disrespected, used, cheated on repeatedly, and just torn apart on top of everything I was already dealing with. I was getting barely any assistance raising my children. I wasn't getting financial assistance with that. It was all on me. And I was getting treated badly on top of it. The worst you could possibly be treated. Could be expected. I had some extreme effects from that in my life, on my mental health and my physical health. So I was just so lost, and I was so young, and I was hurt by the way my life had seemingly turned out at this point, and I was ashamed of myself. I felt very guilty. I was really, really particularly hard on myself up to that point about how I had become a teenage parent. I had had my first child when I was 15 years old, and the outcome of not having any control in that situation after it happened, after, the pregnancy was in motion. My son's father was also 15 years old. Less than a year after my son was born, his father's family moved to the other side of the U.S. He now has a relationship with him as an adult, but I was alone raising him with the help of my parents, of course. Way out of my realm of experiences to even fathom the way that was going to affect my life and even have any clue what to expect. So I just kind of learned on the job and took the curveballs as they came over the next, now it's over 2 decades later. And was it a bumpy ride? And I mean, there's no way you can imagine that at 15. You have no idea what you're about to embark on. You have no clue. Your brain isn't even fully formed. The part of your brain that understands that actions have consequences that could last your entire life is not formed. It's not functioning all the way properly yet until they used to say 25. Now they're thinking closer to 30 years old. You don't have the proper functioning of that prefrontal cortex. So I couldn't imagine that. And as trauma tends to play out in your life, it kind of goes it's like the cart before the horse. You basically complete the acts that bring in the consequences first, and then you figure out the actual severity of those consequences and the reality of that and what you have brought into your life in the after ongoing growth of your brain development. And it becomes more known to you. You gain wisdom and you gain knowledge, and as you gain these things, along with that comes the knowledge of the full realm of understanding of what happened to you. And it's almost like you go through the initial devastation of what it truly means, what you are facing. And sometimes it happens so far after the fact, years and years. It's like that sometimes with abuse as well. Or if as a child you suffered from certain levels of abuse, or even just certain traumas as a child. You don't realize these things are even so bad until one day you're in college and you're sharing stories of your childhood and people are like, I'm so sorry. And you're like laughing. You're just like, what's wrong? And they're just like, I'm so sorry you went through that. And you're just like, what? You don't even get it. You have no idea that it's so crazy and terrible and absolutely traumatic. And your brain has gone into this coping mechanism of just like,
ha 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 ha, this is a funny story.
It's not, though. And once you gain an understanding of why it's not, you can be devastated for the first time. And that's kind of how my teenage parenting situation unfolded in my life. It was just like at every level of growth, I gained a deeper understanding for what it actually meant, what I actually took on at 15. And sometimes it was a lot for me to handle. You guys have all heard it, like the warnings of,
don't date a single mother because they're this and they're that and they're this and they're that and they can't be this for you.
And I mean, please make your preferences known. Make your preferences known. If you don't know if you can handle that, please don't try to, and make it known right away. And I am perfectly fine with people having preferences, but I'm just saying these aren't things I thought about at 15 for my life. there's so many dynamics of this that I could have never even imagined. It wasn't within my realm of understanding of anything. So I had no idea what I was. I'm so grateful that I was able to keep my child, and I love my son. My son is an adult now, and he is the most magnificent person that anyone could know. Like, he is just freaking fabulous. I love him so much. I'm so happy he's here. And at the same time, that situation was hard and very traumatic for me. So I harbored a lot of guilt about doing that as I understood it more throughout the years. And I got into this rut of needing to correct it, needing to redo it and do it right this time, needing to prove to myself that I could have a happy and well-rounded, complete family. And so when I became pregnant with my second child at age 23 or 24, I had him at 24, I think, or something like that. 9 years later, I was working my butt off to make it in the world, to be successful. And I chose someone that I should have known very early on was not right for me, or probably right for much of anyone at that time, because there was physical abuse and cheating. So that's not good behavior, and you should never put up with that. But my guilt and the pressure of needing to prove that I got it right this time, and that I could have a child with a man that was going to stick around, and I could have a family, and I could be responsible for this time, and I could do everything right. And you know, what I did when I was 15 could be looked past now, because I succeeded. I made this right this time. I couldn't fail twice. I could not. That would be the shame of my life. I didn't think I could accept that. I would be so mortified. So feeling like that and feeling that pressure led me to put up with being physically abused and to overlook multiple incidents of being lied to, cheated on, accepting someone who was not putting effort into a relationship, was not family oriented, was just bad for me in every way possible. The pain of that, enduring that every day, with everything I was already taking on, and, you know, being a very young mother and trying to keep that juggling act was absolutely impossible. No one would have been able to do. I did my damnedest at doing it. And I came to a breaking point at some point, just trying to keep up the whole facade all the time, having no one to talk to, no one to turn to. And eventually I hated myself. I thought, you're so pathetic. You're such a loser. If anybody knew about what he treats you like, what you actually go through at home, the desperation to keep someone, the things you put up with, you're disgusting. You're pathetic. These are the things that I told myself, that the voice in my head started to constantly tell me day in, day out.
You are embarrassing. You should be ashamed of yourself. Don't let anyone find this out.
Hide it.
Because this is embarrassing.
And I did hide it. And the side effects of having to uphold that facade and of thinking those things about myself led me eventually to an intolerable pain level that I eventually took it out on my body. And I hurt myself intentionally. One time my son's father had given me a black eye. And I remember I was like, like, what do I do? And it was like very, a black eye is very noticeable. And I had to basically stay away from all friends and family for weeks because I had to wait for it to heal. And when I couldn't avoid them completely, I had to make up a reason. And I said that my son, while I was napping, which I didn't nap. I had no time to nap, but I was napping. And I said that my toddler had taken the remote control and walked up and tried to awaken me with it and had bashed me in the eye with it. This is a completely made up story because actually my ex had done it. So those were some of the ways that I hid it. And during that time, I remember having to go to work with a black eye and just being so embarrassed and having to make up, similar stories like that, and having people look at me kind of like,
okay, well, if you need anything,
people sensed it. People sensed it, but I wasn't forthcoming with the information, so no one could do anything. So eventually it got too much to handle, obviously, and I finally left. And as I said earlier, it takes an average of 7 or 8 times for an abuse victim to leave their abuser. But they leave officially and never go back. And so, this was not an exception to that for my case. I left many times. So this was not the last time, unfortunately. But it was one of the main times I left. I ended my lease on my apartment, and he then had to move out after I left. And I went to live with my parents again, and I just tried to recover. And during that time, I had gotten therapy and gotten diagnosed and learned a lot about how to cope in a better way with what I knew was depression and my anxiety. And I healed a lot of that, and I worked hard over the next decade to really get better at that and get a better handle on that. And for the most part, over the next 8 or 9, 10 years, I had no severe bouts of that. I had no incidents of self-harm. I had no super terrible, deep depressive states. I had some anxiety, but nothing like crippling. I was doing great. I was flourishing eventually. When I eventually left him for good, which was about 4 or 5 years later, I excelled in my personal development, my growth. I was doing wonderful. Just fabulous on my healing journey. And it wasn't until I was being treated badly in my most recent relationship that once again, these issues crept back up for me in very debilitating ways that were worth being concerned about. I started feeling those intensities again, the pain. And truth be told, I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified because I knew this feeling. I knew what this was very clearly, and I knew what it could do to me. And I was afraid. I was absolutely afraid. I was terrified. I knew what needed to change. I knew what was causing it, and I knew it was not going to be good for me. I knew what was coming. So I was very scared. I was in love though, and I didn't want the answer to be that I just had to leave him. I believed wholeheartedly that this person cared about me for real and loved me. And I thought, if I can just explain to him that what he is doing to me is defined as emotional abuse. It absolutely was. It was defined clearly, blatantly. No 2 ways about it. If I could just get him to see that. What good person would want to be emotionally abusing someone that they love? He would stop. He would stop, and then I could be safe, and we could stay together, and our love could endure, and we could make it through this. I thought maybe he just needed some growth on his end as well, and that he could overcome this. I could have proof that love is worth believing in, and that sometimes people don't let you down. And to my great disappointment, that didn't end up being the case. And that caused me such a level of devastation after everything I'd been through that I felt like that was it. This was the one that was going to take me out. And I've yet to fully recover. For the past a little over a year now, I have been going through that breakup and that devastation and just doing everything possible to heal from that. But there were times where I was like, this is the one that's going to be my ending, because I can't get over that. How could he do that to me? How could he treat me like that? How could it end like this? So unfair. And I've touched on it quite a bit in other episodes. So I'm not going to get into all the details here, but painful. He's not going to make that right. he's not going to do anything about that. He hasn't changed a bit. I'm over that. I'm over it, but it's the residual pain of the betrayal and that I was treated that way that just sticks with me. It's really hard to get past. So I'm working on it. But I tried to explain to my partner in those times how serious these things were for me and why I needed him to stop certain behaviors. And not only because they were defined as flat out emotional abuse, like I said, but like they were particularly dangerous to me and my mental health for these reasons. I laid it out for him, but no matter how much I told him about it and tried to explain it to him and tried to help him understand it so many different ways, he took no concern with this. He took no responsibility with this. He enacted no change. He put in no effort. He actually somewhat increased the intensity of that mistreatment at most times when I would try to get him to see that it was his behavior and that he was wrong about many things that was causing this in me at the time. And he actually certainly at times tried to shame me for my mental health struggles, and he tried to use them to blame my mental health for what I was upset with, and that I was pointing the finger at him and his behavior, but that was really just a symptom of my mental illness. And this is what he tried to present to everyone around us and even tried to convince me of, but I knew much better than that. Very familiar with mental health, and I'd been in the struggle for a very long time and overcome some intense things. So I knew very much so that he was incorrect about that. But when you think someone loves you, they have a power in your life. They have your vulnerability in their hands, and they have the power to completely destroy you if they choose to. Like I mentioned this concept in my betrayal videos. They have a position of power and a certain responsibility from their position of influence in your life that you have vulnerably trusted them with. You have given this to them. That it's a requirement in relationships. I mean, if you want a good relationship, a true connected relationship and an intimate bond with someone, and you want that relationship to go very far, you must give that vulnerability over. You must trust them with that part of your heart. You must. And I don't think he ever quite gave that over to me, but I certainly did my part in giving mine to him. And he was aware that he had it, and he chose to hurt me. He chose to destroy me with that. And that is the choice that you give someone with relationships when you go all in. And so that was quite disappointing when I noticed myself struggling to get relief in certain times again. This familiar feeling. And I noticed intrusive thoughts and becoming so ashamed of the relationship the way it was again, what I was putting up with, what I was accepting, what I was sticking around for again. I felt like I was disrespecting myself again by letting someone treat me so badly. And then simultaneously just disappointed with how I felt I'd been fooled by this person. How did I fall for this? How did I let it get this far? I was so embarrassed and ashamed and upset at myself and disappointed, let down, just praying that this was not what it looked like. Praying that he was my real friend, my real love, and that this was going to be something we were going to overcome. Because I just couldn't accept that this was what it looked like. How unfair. How unfair. Like, why did I need that? Why did I deserve that? Why couldn't it just be real? Hadn't I been through enough? It was the letdown of the century for me. It was so hard to accept. I didn't want to. Not at all. I really believed that I could not accept it. I did not think I'd be able to handle that. I realized eventually that I was in a dangerous position again, and that my partner was not going to be supportive. More so, he would likely be the catalyst to bring me to my demise. I realized that he was not my friend. He did not love me, and he did not care about me. He was not someone that I could trust nor depend on. I felt very alone, and I knew that I had to leave. I did not want to leave at all, but I had to leave. So this is just my story of the fearful avoidant and how they will often continuously struggle with mental health and physical health. I just need to say, anybody who believes still in 2023, the year we're in right now, that people suffering from mental health conditions are just being crybabies or are just crazy or like whatever other stigma used to be prominent about mental health, really need a wake-up call. This is scientifically proven at this point. Scientifically proven. Through studies of chemicals in our brains. These are scientifically proven facts, these conditions, and where they stem from somewhat. And it's just undeniably more serious than just
Get it together.
Suck it up. Get over it.
You have responsibilities as an adult. Just get over it.
You have to take care of things. Like, just stop being a baby.
That's a very emotionally unintelligent viewpoint at this point. And I'm sorry, but that's just the way it is. I mean, that is what data backs up. There's plenty of data and research readily available for anyone who wants to understand better. It's just willfully ignorant at this point to continue to carry that viewpoint and act like you just don't know any better and just not educate yourself in any way about this. It affects such a great percentage of the population. It's undeniable. You can't get by with that anymore in 2023 as an excuse. Just remain ignorant to this. Please have compassion for people who are struggling with this. And if it's too much for you to handle, that's fine. But if you really love this person, understand that this can happen to anyone. Anyone. So if you really love them and you really care about them, put some effort into understanding what's happening to them. It's terrible. And educate yourself. That's not a lot to ask. And if they're willing to get help and grow and put in their own effort, and they're doing all of that, you would at least attempt to support them through that. You would at least attempt to be there for them and understand it. You wouldn't go humiliate them by telling people about their behaviors or what's happening to them out of context without including your part in it, that you are literally enacting behaviors on them that is stirring this up, and try to shame them while not putting in any effort to change what you're doing, while they just suffer more and more in front of you, knowing that it's your behavior that's stirring that up. And then you just desert them. You just desert them in their darkest hour, in their greatest time of need for your support, when they've been telling you for months and months in every which way possible that this is happening because you're being emotionally abusive to them, and that has a really negative effect on them, a severe detrimental effect on them due to what they have been through. And they've explained that to you. You would not do that to someone you love. I'm sorry, period. You would not do it. So I understand that he didn't love me. And I understand that he didn't care. And I hope that is not the case in your life. I hope that's not the case for you. But if it is, please listen to me. Your worth and value is not defined by this person believing you have worth and that you are enough and that you matter enough for them to care about this. At all. You are valuable intrinsically, and you can overcome this. You can. Even if you absolutely think you cannot, you can, and you will. And you deserve so much better than this. Please listen to me. You matter so much, and you can have so much better. You will overcome it. You can do it. I did it. Take it from me. I did it, and I believed I could not. Just know that there will come a day when this doesn't hurt anymore. And you are happy again. This will not be the end of you. I promise you, okay? This happened because a person was not self-reflective. This happened because a person was very self-focused. This happened because a person could not be brave enough to take accountability for their wrongs and their mistakes. That's why this happened, okay? There isn't much I find more upsetting than a person who activates someone's love and attachment, promises to love them and be by their side, then actively tears them down once they're hooked. Then they show their true self, their true colors. After this person's just been blindsided, totally not expecting that, tears them down to a level they haven't been to in years. Something they legit had to fight to get out of. Worked so hard to get out of before. Worked so hard to trust somebody again. This person comes in and interrupts your growth, interrupts your shine under the guise of love, and then waits until you're hooked to treat you like pure garbage and desert you, break your heart, put you down, make you think you're so little of yourself, just like back when you were in that dark place. They can't even be decent enough to see you through that. Have you ever been that unkind to somebody?
Nope.
My guess is no. I certainly haven't. I mean, you don't think you're better than that. You don't think you're better than someone who would be that unkind to someone. I'm not saying like you're better than somebody, but like you don't think you deserve better than someone who would treat you that unkind and not value you. You think that someone that behaved like that gets to determine whether you're valuable or not. That someone like that treated you like you have no value because you actually have none? No. They are wrong. They were wrong. They were in the wrong, point blank, period. They're wrong. And that's on them. But you can recover and you will recover if you're struggling. Okay? There is 24/7 assistance contact numbers in the description of this video. If you know you're struggling really bad in this moment, then, and if it's not in this moment and you want to just jot it down, put it in a safe space, put it in your phone for a time when you might need it. I have absolutely reached out to them before. When I was living in that house, when I was going through this, I felt so alone and so desperate at times for support and just someone to speak to me kindly that I absolutely texted the crisis line at times, and I definitely called the number at times. So they're very helpful. They're right there to help you. They're literally employed to do so. And there wouldn't be a place like this where people are employed to work around the clock if this were not a common human need. It would not exist. Okay, so let that be all the proof you need that you're not crazy and you're not valueless and you are worthy of love and support and kindness and human decency. Require that. It's hard. But you can make it through this. From someone who's gone through it. Just believe me, please. Okay? Now, on the positive side of things, what can you do if you are a supportive partner and you do love your partner and care about them? If they are suffering from mental illnesses such as depression, anxiety. Well, for this, I wanted to refer to a scholarly source to give really accurate information because I certainly am very close to this topic and I know that it's very serious and I don't want to just report information off the top of my head. So this information comes from Medical News Today, and their editors and writers ensure every article that they publish undergo an industry leading review process, which includes rigorous fact-checking for statistical, medical, and scientific accuracy, and they only draw their information from peer-reviewed studies, academic research institutions, and medical journals. So all of their resources are scholarly and peer-reviewed. Okay, so like that's exactly what's like required in a college level paper as well. This article is called How to Support a Partner with Depression from Medical News Today, and I will link it in the description. And it says the support of family and friends can play an important role in the treatment of mental health conditions. Ways to help a partner with depression include knowing what questions to ask, learning about the condition, and more. So if you are taking the stance of,
This is not my problem. I'm not responsible for your feelings. This is all your fault. You need to go to therapy.
if those are things that are coming out of your mouth as their partner, and they need more support than that in the condition that they're facing, and you guys are just not properly matched. So, I mean, you don't have to beat yourself up about it, but like, don't lead them to believe that you are supporting them and that you would support them if you absolutely know that you don't feel like you should have to. Make that known, I guess. Depression is a condition that affects around 16 million adults in the United States each year. Okay? So, like, not that uncommon. Not uncommon at all. Useful questions to ask is something that it goes over. So I'm going to go over them real quick. Can you help me understand how you're feeling? That's a good one. What activities do you find enjoyable right now? Do you enjoy spending time with others? How are your energy levels? Are you sleeping more or less than usual? Are you eating more or less than usual? Are you able to concentrate on things right now? And do you have thoughts of death or of unaliving yourself? Questions to avoid. It's essential not to trivialize depression, which is a serious medical condition. Word for word, okay? Examples of questions to avoid. Why can't you just cheer up? Don't I make you happy? Guess you're not happy with me, so when will you feel better? Can't you understand this is just all in your head? Why are you making such a big deal about this? Are you aware that others have it a lot worse than you? Or are you aware of the burden that you're putting on people? Avoid those. All right, so some other things that it covers in this article: learning about depression, symptoms, understand and validate their feelings, ask them what they need from you, encourage treatment, provide support during recovery, accept that there will be bad days, look after yourself, how and when to get professional support, and warning signs of unaliving themselves. So those are all things that this article covers, and it's really, really thorough. Again, it's linked in the description. Okay, so those are the ways to support a partner. If they're suffering from a different mental illness, then just do some research, and there's probably plenty of articles online that can give you a good plan. Also, the SAMHSA hotline that's in the description, they can help as well. 24/7 access, 24/7 support on that number down there, okay? Fearful Avoidants, you can heal your attachment. You're beautiful. You're wonderful. You matter. Partners of Fearful Avoidance, you can facilitate this, and don't forget that you also are important, regardless of the attachment style, regardless if you are a fearful avoidant or if you are the partner of a fearful avoidant. You always have to think about yourself and loving yourself and making sure you're being treated properly first, okay? If you know you're giving and loving and you're doing everything you can and you're not doing anything from a selfish place, but everyone, just please prioritize self. And then if you love someone, provide them with the support that they need. Give it a good effort. Don't forget to subscribe, my lovely people. I love you, and I will see you soon. Until next time, bye.